So, hi, James. Thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate you doing this for me. I heard about you through an old colleague and friend of mine, Sonia Wilson, who's a journalist slash author slash founder of a charity slash pretty much everything. And when I looked through your bio, it kind of like, I thought, oh God, my handle online is Generalist Alan. And I looked and I thought, jeepers, this guy really is a generalist. He's a bricklayer, a teacher, a journalist, a surfer, an author, a publisher, pretty much everything. So, but for those that don't know you, probably the Dragon Books is probably the most obvious starter. So why don't you give us a quick 101 on James?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, you're right. Sonia is a bit of a superwoman, that's for sure. So I was a journalist for quite a long time, and I worked in Ireland, and that's where I kind of learned to become a journalist. I met an editor of a small local newspaper in a pub and talked myself into a job, the way Kiwis often do.
Yeah.
But came back to New Zealand and ended up working at the New Zealand Herald for maybe 12 years or so. And during that time, I had two young sons, two children, and began to write children's books specifically for them. And and I actually, at the time, I was the editor of the careers section back when there was a decent careers section in the newspapers. And I had to fill, 10 pages of stories to go with all the careers ads. And one of those stories I did on a self-published author called Mark Somerset. I was Mark and Rowan, a husband and wife team who was super successful. I'd written 3 rhyming picture books, and I thought, maybe I'll go. They were on Waiheke Island. I took the ferry over and I spent a couple of hours with them, and then I wrote a story on them. And at the end, I pulled out my manuscript and handed it to Mark and said, would you mind taking a look? And he said, yeah, it's got some promise.
Yeah.
But during the course of the time I'd spent with them, I had already kind of decided I'm going to self-publish my own. If I do this, I'm going to do it myself, just like Mark's done. And I haven't kind of looked back. So I have those 3 picture books for sort of 3 to 7-year-olds. I wrote another series called The Dragon Defenders of 5 junior novels for 7 to 12-year-olds. And then another trilogy called Children of the Rush, sort of set in Otago in the 1861 gold rush.
Yeah.
And I'm launching a new one in this June, a couple of weeks.
So what do you think? So some of the things we talk about in the newsletter and on the podcast is some people seem to be able to just take the next step. And it's kind of like often that's all it takes, you rather than thinking grand, it's just take the next step. So you're clearly a kind of person that takes the next step. What is it about you that you think enables that?
Yeah, I don't know. I never set out to do this. Actually, by the way,
Right.
the 2 books that I forgot to mention were 2 trashy surf thrillers that I wrote during lockdown and COVID, just for a bit of fun. So they're for adults, definitely not for children. But I never set out to be a writer in that sense, to write books. I just wrote these 3 rhyming stories for my children, and then I was asked to read them to some other kids, and then people were saying, these are great, they should be books. And so it was just this, I don't know, maybe it's just keeping your eye out for opportunities and listening and saying, okay, well, what would that involve and how hard could that be? And doing a bit of homework and then going, oh, maybe I'll have a crack. I mean, it was a risk, and I didn't know what I was doing. I think I printed 5,000 hardbacks of The Dragon Hunt as my first book, which was crazy because
that sounds quite a risk.
5,000 is a good number of books to sell in New Zealand anyway. Particularly hardbacks, $30 each. People were, the bookstores were like, have you got any paperbacks?
Yeah.
So, but it took me quite a few years to get rid of them, but I didn't know what I was doing, and I've got my garage now has got 20,000 books in it. So
Wow.
I do all the distribution out of my house, and I wouldn't have it any other way actually now. You can give these things away. You can give a distributor that job. But every time you do, you lose a little cut, and it's a pretty marginal business anyway, particularly in New Zealand when you're selling small amounts.
Sure.
But I've gone on to get publishers around the world. I've got half a dozen publishers around the world. So that's traditional publishing,
Yep.
whereas I self-publish here in New Zealand. So, and Amazon is a big seller of my books as well. So there's a whole bunch of different things
Yeah,
going
sure.
on now in audiobooks and the whole lot.
So, so you say you didn't deliberately set out to become an author or to be a publisher. There must have been a point though where you went, "Oh, this is actually a thing. Yeah, I'm not just writing these stories on the bus for my kids anymore. This is actually a thing." What point was that?
Well, I got those 3 picture books out and they were doing all right to my surprise.
Yeah,
I mean, it was kind of brutal because I had to ring every bookstore in New Zealand. I was doing it on my lunch breaks from the New Zealand
yeah,
Herald. Go across the road, sit in a cafe or whatever, and just ring bookstore after bookstore. And most of the time, they would say, "Who are you? What are you?"
yeah,
And it was, I think I rang Paper Plus Papamoa maybe 8 times, and I'd ring them back every time I'd hit a milestone. Like, I've sold a thousand books. You sure you don't want one? Sure you
yeah.
don't want to stock them? And they'd go, "Oh, nah." And then I'd ring back, "I'm up to 2,000 now. You sure?" And I broke them eventually just through pure persistence.
Well,
But
you say this has been accidental. That sounds incredibly deliberate to me.
yeah, well, I'd have 5,000 books in the garage. I could either sell them or be one of those guys who is 70 years old going, "You guys want a free book? You want a book?" But so what happened is when I had those 3 picture books out, my boss at the Herald said, "Have you got a minute?" and took me into his office, made me redundant, said, "You're losing your job." I was the editor at that point of a magazine called Element, which was a sustainable business and lifestyle monthly magazine that came out in the Herald, and it was good. It was kind of before
Yeah,
its time.
I recall it.
And but the advertising, the guy that sold the ads would go to people and say it's $5,000 a page, and they just laugh at him and say,
Yeah,
"I
yeah,
put that into Facebook, gets me 10
yeah,
times as much traction." So it fell over like a lot of things did.
yeah,
And when I got made redundant, about a month from the day I got made redundant, the Bologna Children's Book Fair, the biggest children's book fair in the world, was taking
yeah,
place in Italy. So I booked a ticket and I went, and I had no idea what I was doing. You're supposed to make all the appointments beforehand.
yeah,
And of course, I would go up to these publishers and say, "You interested?" And they would go, "Can't talk, too busy, can't talk, come back
yeah,
and see me tomorrow." Got a meeting. No one had any time. And I spent 2.5 days, just not a single person. It's a 3-day fair. Not a single person had looked at them. And I was like, "What a fucking idiot. Like, I've just blown all this money going to Italy. I don't have a job to come back to."
yeah,
And, I didn't get that much redundancy. I had 2 little kids and a wife at home. I was like, "Oh, mate, what an idiot." But the kind of the last hour or two of the fair, I went and sat down on this couch, and I didn't even pay any mind to what the stand was. Turned out it was Sourcebooks from the US, and the head of Sourcebooks came out and sat beside me, and she was knackered. She'd had a big fair. We
yeah.
just got yarning. And she said, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm trying to get a publisher. It's not going well." "And where you from?" "New Zealand." And she goes, "Where are your books?" And I was like, "Well, they're in my bag down there." She goes, "Well, you going to show me?" I was like, "What? Who is this person?" I gave her a book. She looked through it for about 30 seconds, and she goes, "I'll publish those. I want world rights."
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
I got this US deal. And in fact, she published them in all the English language speaking countries, apart from New Zealand. And she gave me 35 grand or whatever. And so I had what was left of my redundancy. I had the
Yep.
advance on those 3 books. And I came home, and I got stuck into writing my 2 first novels for children. And both of them went to #1 when they were released.
Wow.
So by the end of that year, I was like, "Oh, I can keep doing this. I can be a full-time author." And I've done that ever since. And it's hard
Do you
in New
think?
Zealand. Not many full-time authors in New Zealand.
Sure. No, absolutely. And in fact, oh, actually, we'll get to that in a minute. But it, that feels like a big risk. You're made redundant. You go to a book fair. Not many people would do that. Most people would try and find another job.
Yeah.
That feels like a really big leap. What is it about you think that enables you to make that leap? And I mean, how did the conversation go at home?
Yeah, well, actually, you know what happened? So before I was made redundant, when I was with Element, we did this article, and I met Annabelle Langbein,
Oh, yeah.
Now,
Yep.
Annabelle Langbein, the chef, like she went to Bologna years before, did the exact same thing. Didn't
Yeah.
she actually bought herself a stand, paid a whole lot of money,
Right.
and she got a deal just by bowling up to people. And
Yep.
I think that must have gone in somewhere because I thought, oh, maybe I'll have a crack. Sorry, what was your question? I've forgotten your
Yeah,
question
well,
now.
it was about what enables you to take that kind of leap? And also, I was thinking, how would the discussion go at home? It's like, I've just been made redundant.
Yeah,
I kind of think I got some books. I might go and try and sell them overseas.
yeah. The discussion at home was fine. Rebecca is, she's an amazing support, really. She's always been and doesn't mind taking a risk, She's like,
Right.
go for it. So, um, but what enabled me? I don't know. I guess, I mean, there was encouraging signs. I knew the books were good. They were
Yeah.
selling well here in New Zealand. Um, they'd made the Whitcoul's Kids Top 50 list and they were doing well.
Yeah.
We got shortlisted for an award. That was Link, my illustrator, amazing illustrator, Link Choi. So I knew they were good. I knew what we had was solid. So I thought, naively, I think, just thought, well,
Sure.
this should be easy, They're good. Someone's going to want them. Of course they are. And actually, I think it's probably a strength in a lot of when you don't know an industry, it's kind of a strength. You think, well, someone else has done it. You don't realize how hard it is.
Yeah.
I get contacted so much by people that are interested in self-publishing that I wrote a big 5,000 word document on how to do it. This was years ago. I still
Yeah.
send it out to people. Rather than answer millions of questions, I say, here we go, have a look at this
Yeah.
and come back to me with anything you want to know. And quite a few people read it and go, not for me,
Too
because
much. Yeah.
I only spend 5 or 10% of my time actually writing. The rest of the time's being a publisher.
Yeah. Sure.
But I guess it's
If you
that
still got that,
naivety,
we might put a link to that if you still have, if you're up for that.
Yeah, sure.
When we sometimes talk to people about risk and about doing something and thinking it's a risk, often not doing something is a risk as well, and people don't consider or take that into consideration. Like, it's fine to think you'll carry on with your job and you won't take a risk doing something else, but as you well know, your job doesn't necessarily stay. So there's risk on, risk off. It's hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, living the rest of your life and wondering what if or what might have
Sure.
been is terrible. You got to give it a crack. I knew if it all failed, I would have gone and stacked some supermarket shelves or I would have done something. I would have found a job doing something.
Yeah.
And I knew we weren't going to starve. We'd be lean, and it has been lean. Those first few years was pretty lean. But, we're a young family and we were just, weren't going far anyway. We were just mired in nappies and whatever. Just what you do when you go through those first few years when your children are young.
Um, it's I talk to people a lot of the time, and it's sort of like, it's really hard to do this, really hard to do that. So in lots of ways, it's never been easier. You think about, the way we're doing this podcast right now, using a software called Riverside that enables us to hook up and have a high quality conversation and use later. Or, I imagine, you enabled you to find an illustrator somewhere, enables you to run logistics. What does your process look like when you're starting a new book? Then you've got to get it to people. How does that work for you?
Yeah, you're right. And it has been made much easier. And I think the trick when you're doing something like I'm doing is to have multiple streams of income because things can just fall over.
Sure.
Bookstores close and Whitcoulls could close tomorrow. And actually,
Yep.
they nearly did. I think they got into trouble and
Yeah.
got bailed out. That'd be a big chunk of income gone. So now I've recorded my own audio books and I've done all kinds of things. I've got the software to create ebooks. I've put things on Amazon, and that's been great. It's really great. Yeah, I know Amazon gets quite a bad reputation. Bookstores in particular
Sure.
can't stand Amazon. It seems to have backed off a little bit now. That I think there's room
Well, they
for
didn't all
everything.
die like we thought they were going to.
No,
Yeah, the
exactly.
bookstores kind of
Yeah.
stuck around.
And you know what? I think it's made bookstores better because they realised
Right.
they've had to be these brilliant curators of books. And they
Absolutely,
are,
yeah.
when you go into a bookstore, it's like, whoa, you don't even know there's so many good options.
Yeah,
A good bookstore is just fantastic now, it's not just the standard, fare that comes through from the biggest publishers. And so we appreciate that, I think. But you're right, all of those things become much easier to do. And in a sense, maybe a little harder as well, just because they are easier. There's so many more books going onto
sure.
Amazon and so many more audiobooks, and there's so many podcasts, and it's probably harder to get that cut through. But
Sure. I
it's
was
always been
thinking
about
about
word of
this.
mouth, right? If you're making good
Yeah.
stuff, it's always been about word of mouth. I can do a big splash with one of my books, but if it isn't good, it's going to die. It's just going to fade into obscurity because no one's going to talk about it. And
It's
that's
interesting.
just,
So,
yeah.
what I've been talking about a lot lately, and the obvious thing, people banging on about AI every 2.5 minutes and stuff like that, is what AI is not good at is creating community. And like what you were saying about the independent bookstores, they build a community, yeah, so that people come because they know that bookstore is a great curator. They understand taste and nuance and things like that, which AI can't. And one of the things I looked at through what you've been doing is a real effort to build community around the product, around the stories in the books. I assume that's been deliberate.
Uh, it has been, I guess, but it's also what I like.
Right.
I probably visit 40 or 50 schools a year. And I love it. It's amazing,
Right.
as a writer, you're sitting on your own, lost in your own head. And
Sure.
then the next day I'll be talking to 400 kids. It's mad. Like it's a crazy combination of things to be stacking into a week, but I love it. And there's always a frothing group of 7 or 8 kids that are super fans, just can't wait to meet you and
Yeah.
talk to you about your books. But I love that. For
It's very
my
different from being a journalist writing a story um,
it is,
where
yeah.
you get no feedback at all.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes I miss it. Over might be over some school holidays or something. It'll be a long time since I've done that.
Yeah.
I think, I've been sitting at home looking at, just stuck in my own head now for quite a long time. Haven't changed out of my pajamas for 4 days. Need to get out, right? But so I think that community. You're right. It's very important. And when I'm launching my new book on June the 15th. This one, Marlin Foundling and the Circus of Lost
Yep.
Children, and I've organised a tour from Invercargill all the way up to Matakana. So that's going to take me 2 weeks. I'm hitting the road in my little car, and I'm just
So
going
cool.
to cover the country. So yeah, I can't wait. It's great, and I
Are
know
you
I
at a
get to
point
know
where
all the
you ring up
bookstore
and they say,
owners
"Hey, yes, we know you now"?
pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've done. The books have sold really well in New Zealand, and they continue to do so. So I think the Dragon Hunters came out 2012 and it still sells really well. So it's been a long time, and I know all the bookstore owners because, of course, I rang them all during
Yeah,
lunchtime.
that's right.
You know, so
Um,
it's fun. There's a good community of bookstores, and the literary community is really kind of genteel and lovely and
yeah,
kind. And I regularly meet with a bunch of authors, and we have lunch, and it's really nice.
that seems like the opposite of what people would think about the publishing industry. It's like the publishing industry is like cutthroat, and it's who you know, and it's pretty dark stuff at times. This feels like completely the opposite.
Yeah. Well, it can be, I guess. And there's a funny thing that the literary fiction is, I find, a little bit snobby. So
Sure.
there will never be, unless you're writing literary fiction, you're not going to get a Creative New Zealand grant. Probably,
Yep.
95% chance you're not going to get one. Those
Yep.
are the people that get them. You're not going to win any kind of award. So there's a bit of snobbery there. It's literary fiction or nothing, or non-fiction, I guess. But
Yeah.
in terms of fiction, that's the only thing. Everything else is a bit pushed away, all the genre fiction and everything. And some of
Right.
our genre fiction writers are so incredibly successful. It's
Yeah.
just unbelievable how many copies these people have sold. Kate O'Keefe in the Hawke's Bay, she writes ice hockey closed door romance. And you know what
What's
closed
that
door
TV
romance
series that
is?
was on at the moment?
She's sold over 2 million copies. Just like
Wow.
unbelievable.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and so the Nalini Singh, all these people writing genre fiction, they don't actually need Creative New Zealand grants, to be fair,
Yeah.
because they're making so much money. But it's really interesting when you start delving into that self-publishing scene, how incredibly successful people are.
When somebody asks you, James, what is it that you do? Do you go, I'm an author, or do you go? I mean, sometimes you're an author, sometimes you're a publisher, sometimes you're a marketer. How do you think of it?
Yeah, an author, first and
Right.
foremost. The rest is just admin, really.
I do.
Yeah.
What is the school tour? Doesn't sound like admin. It sounds like something that you really love doing.
Yeah, well, it's fun admin, but
Right.
the in terms of how I identify, I'm an author, and that's
Yeah.
the creative part of me that I most value, that I think is what I can offer. Um,
Sure.
anyone can probably do what I do aside from, all the admin stuff, but writing my books, no one can write books like
Y-
my books. So
Yeah.
actually, the other thing I should mention is that when you visit a school and you talk to children,
Yeah.
what's incredibly gratifying is hearing afterwards, either from their parents or from the teachers, how it affected those children and how
Yeah.
inspired they get to read. And it's amazing, like the effect that an author can have when they
Right.
visit a school on the children just to read for pleasure
Yeah.
is astonishing. And I wish there was more of it in New Zealand. There's some
Right.
pretty good writers in schools run by Read New Zealand. They have a kind of program, but you got to sign up for it. You have to pay for the author to come, but I would love to see that subsidized
Sure.
more, because it's just amazing. Like, the teachers can't inspire kids like an author going to their school
Yeah.
can inspire them.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to when I was a kid. I was I was a slow learner, and because I had a hearing problem, and I used to go to the principal's office. He used to take me and another kid every day and read a book. And it was actually, I still remember the book. It was Shane, which is, I don't know if you know that story, um, but it stuck with me from primary school. It was a much older book than my age, if you know what I mean. Even though I was a
Yeah.
slow reader and stuff like that, but it absolutely stuck with me, and it's amazing what impact good stories can have on kids and
Oh,
how
it's
long they
incredible.
carry them for.
Yeah. And the other thing I did is, after I published my picture books, a friend of mine came to stay with me, and he showed me augmented reality for the first time. He had a business
Yes, I
card.
saw
He
that.
put it on the bench, held his phone over it, and a sort of silvery grey orb was wobbling above his business card. And I'd never seen anything like it.
Yeah,
And of course, Pokemon and all that came along, that game that people were playing. But I wondered if I asked him if I could retrospectively kind of put a 3D map on the map that's in the front on the end papers of my picture books.
yeah,
So he put me in touch with those people, which I did, and then I put that into my Dragon Defenders Junior fiction series as well. So there are 4 or 5 pages in each one of those books where you download this free app and you point your device at this particular page, and
yeah,
something will happen. It could be a video, could be a 3D image that floats above the page, could be a code that is decoded as you're holding over it,
yeah,
could be just something that you listen to. And so that it's been really interesting, the feedback I've had on that. The purists, the book purists, can't stand it. They're like, "Why are you bringing an
yeah,
iPad to a book?"
yeah, yeah.
But then I get so many emails from parents saying,
The
"My
gateway.
children never wanted to read a book,
Yeah,
and that's the thing that got them into it, and now they're reading." And it's not a game. You look at it for 2 minutes and you
yeah,
decode the message, then you put your iPad down and you keep reading. And I think a lady came up to me in a bookstore once and paid me the greatest compliment. She said she went into her son's room about 10:30 at night. She could see the light from the iPad coming out from under the duvet, and she grabbed it and ripped it back, thinking he was playing his computer games, but he
he
was
was reading the
using
book.
the light to read the book.
That's so cool.
Yeah, unless he was incredibly quick, but yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. Um, a lot of things one of the things we talk about is people making a decision to pivot to something else, or and quite often the term that comes up is reinvention. People reinventing themselves, but more often than not, when you look at it, it ends up being reversioning. They go back to something that they enjoyed, or something that they started that turned into something that they didn't enjoy so much. So, do you think you were always a storyteller and a writer?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like everything I've done has been a strange, strange coincidence, really. Or like I met the editor in the pub in Ireland,
Yeah.
and up to that point, I had never once thought of being a journalist.
Yeah.
I knew I could write, but he was kind of a swashbuckling guy, smoking
Yeah.
cigarettes and drinking pints of Guinness. And I thought, man, he's cool. Wouldn't mind hanging out with him. And I said, do you need any writers? And yeah, I feel like children's books was kind of the same. I never thought of being an author before that. But once I'd written those stories and somebody suggested, I thought, oh, why not? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't feel like I really have any sort of grand plan or any long-term goals
Sure.
until I get, like, even when I wrote the first Dragon Defenders book, I never intended it to be a series, and it ended
Yeah.
up being 5 books, which is a stupid way of doing it, because then you got to go, oh, shit, where am I going now, you know?
All right.
This new series, this book that I've just started, is probably the first time I've actually thought, okay, what's the story arc over 5 books here?
Yeah. Has that
Yeah.
made your life easier?
Don't know. I've got 2 written quite
Yeah.
quickly. I don't know. We'll see. I'll tell you at the end of
Well,
it. Probably.
it seems like you're incredibly prolific. When I was doing my research, I was looking at from at least quite a few years ago. You're doing at least a book a year, but it's probably actually a bit more than that. So, what does a day look like for you?
Yeah, it is a book a year, and it's not that prolific. I hear this a lot from people, but
Oh,
actually,
really?
once you get into your stride, if you're not knocking out a 35,000 word children, if you're a decent writer, if you're not knocking out 35,000 word children's book in, I don't know, a couple of months, you're probably not working
Right.
hard enough, you know? So the writing probably takes 2 months. Actually, my new one is 70,000 words. I don't know what I'm doing. It's way too long. But I thought, the super fans of books love the detail. So I thought,
Yeah.
right, I'm going to
Yeah.
build this world. It's going to be rich and full of detail. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm not that prolific, I don't think. I tend to always be thinking about what the next move is, but I spend a lot of time walking in the hills or going for a surf, or I don't work that hard. But I feel like when I'm doing those things, it's
Yeah.
always turning over in your head. It's one of those weird things I try and justify it to myself that I'm working where I'm not, but
It's
I kind
research
of am.
trips.
Like if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have the ideas that I have, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it is work, but it's pretty easy.
I'm not sure many people would actually agree with you that it's pretty easy, but and I think
Well,
that's
it's fun. Let's put it that way. It's fun work.
yeah, maybe. I think a lot of what happens to people as we get older, when we want to do something, it has to be of some value, or it has to make some money, or it has to justify itself in some way rather than just doing it because it's something you want to do. And it feels like that maybe that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it feels like that's more you. You're kind of just like, well, I want to do this, so I'm going to give it a crack, and what happens happens.
Yeah, a little bit. But my wife is studying at the moment. She's at university, still have 2 children.
Yeah.
If I don't make money, we're in the
Yeah.
shit, So the reason I put such effort into promotion and visiting schools is A, because I really enjoy it, but B,
Yeah.
because if these don't work commercially, I'm a bit screwed, I've got to go and find
Yeah.
another job. So there's definitely that. And, of my 2 surf novels are kind of a perfect example. They've been really well received, but they're so niche, they're
Yeah.
really, they're surf thrillers. If you love surfing, you're going to love them.
Yeah.
But because they're so niche, it's been I thought mistakenly that it'd be quite hard to reach that community, quite easy to reach that community, but it hasn't been.
Right.
So they trickle out. In terms of the sales of my children's books, they're a flood compared to the surf books, which are a
Yeah.
trickle.
Yeah.
And kind of an encouraging trickle, and it's in an upward trend. And they've been out for a while. I started the first one in 2020, and they're still kind of gaining popularity. But I thought, how else can I get to these people? So I started my own podcast, the Mad Surf Stories podcast.
Yep.
And I put a chapter of the audio book at the end of each interview.
Yeah.
Whether that's going to continue, I don't know. I think I've got 11 episodes there now, and they're pretty amazing.
Yeah.
There's some crazy stories from people who just had some most bizarre experiences, their boat sinking in Indonesia and swimming for 72 hours and all kinds of mad stuff. So I really enjoyed it. It's been some great conversations. There's a guy caught in the Boxing Day tsunami,
Well,
just crazy stuff. But I thought, okay, that's a good way of of reaching this audience and then promoting my book on the back of it. And it's I can see on Amazon as soon as a new episode goes out, there's a couple more
now,
copies sold. So it's just been a bit creative, really, on how you reach your audience.
and that's so. When I was doing the research, there was a piece about the dragon eggs and things like that. It actually feels like you actually have a bit of a flair for marketing. It's a bit kind of like Seth Godin's, what is it, Purple Cow kind of thing. It's like, something to stand out, something to make unique. How do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, weirdly, the book industry, I think, is pretty bad at marketing.
Right.
And so, not that I'm any expert, but I often think, I don't know, have you ever heard a book being advertised on the radio? Like, they really, they send books to newspapers
Yeah.
for review, newspapers and magazines for review in their book review pages, which are disappearing and have disappeared. There's probably half a dozen left.
Yeah.
So I remember getting a review in the New Zealand Herald and Canvas magazine, and I thought, geez, James, brace yourself. You're going to be overrun by orders after this comes out.
Yeah.
It was just crickets. Maybe got a couple. It was unbelievable. I thought, what do you got to do? So I thought, well, I realised that it's a slow process, and it's that whole seeing something 6 or 7 times before it clicks in your brain. And
Yeah.
then I thought, okay, and so for this tour that I'm doing, I've had this huge 2.5 metre wide, 2 metre tall light box made up of the cover of this book. And it's amazing. It's beautiful. It's an aluminium frame, but a cover and LED lights behind it, and it's just incredible. And I'm going to put that up everywhere and hopefully get it into a pop-up shop. And just never seen anybody. Occasionally you'll see a book on a billboard, but
Yeah.
they're just not very imaginative in terms of how you can get that message out there. And there's so much work. I put so much work into a book. I can't just, and my books were published in America by the Source Books, the same lady that sat down beside me in Italy. They took me over there. I did a 7-city tour to launch it. But I was, and I went to they sent me to New Orleans, and they had one bookshop for me to visit, and that was it. And about 10 people turned up. They were spending thousands. I was like, what are you doing? Like, put me to work. Yeah. And then 2 weeks after it's launched, it all just dries up and all the promotion goes away. So the whole model for book publishing is put out 50 books a year and see which one sticks. And they give each one 2 weeks of promotion, and that's it. And I think stuff that I've done work too hard on this book to do that. So that's the beauty of doing your own self-publishing.
Yeah.
So you never let them go.
Well, nobody cares like you do.
Yeah, and when I go to a school, I still read them The Dragon Hunters if I'm talking to year ones, and I wrote that in 2012.
Yeah.
So that, it just keeps why would you let it tail off if you don't have to?
Yeah. If somebody was sitting around thinking, I've got an idea for a book, I think it's not bad. I'm not quite sure how to go about it, short of giving us the document, which we'll put up. But what would your advice initially be?
Write it to the best of your ability, and then get an editor, get a professional editor. And the New Zealand Society of Authors advertise a bunch of editors, but it's going to cost you a bit of ping. But you're at nothing if you don't have a good editor, really. And especially, I think every time I write a book, I need an editor less and less, just because I know how to structure, I know what I'm doing.
Right, sure.
But my first books, they were like, geez, where do I start, James? They were rough.
Yeah.
So and I think anyone would be like that, no matter how good a writer they were. I could be wrong, but yeah, I think getting an editor and getting it into the best shape you can. And then if you want to go the traditional route, see if you have to get yourself an agent, which is not easy.
Yeah.
There's this catch-22. The agents aren't interested in you unless you've already had a book published, and the publishers aren't interested in you unless it comes from an agent. Yeah. And I tried to get an agent I had one, and we parted ways. And then I tried to get another one, an international agent, about 6 months ago. No one bit. No one was keen. And I've got 250,000 sales under my belt. So
Yeah.
you'd think it wouldn't have been that hard. But
Yeah.
yeah, no one wanted to know. So at least I've got a good plan B, right? I know what I'm doing. I
Yeah.
know how to put a book on Amazon. I know how to make a good product. But I
Yeah.
feel like I can bring it to here, and an agent and a big 5 publisher can bring it to the
Yeah.
top
Yeah.
level,
Sure.
So it's either are good options, but if you're just starting out, that's, you have to get the book as good as possible because that's the product, right?
And I think the landscape's changed there quite a bit, isn't it? A lot of people think, oh, well, I'll just self-publish, and they don't get an editor, and it turns out the book's actually not that good, and guess what? It doesn't sell. Whereas, to make the product, even if you're self-publishing, you still got to make the product as good as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if it is a great book and you self-publish, if you're going to, you've still got to get it either on shelves and bookshops,
Yeah.
which is not easy.
Yeah.
And it's easier for a kid's book because you can just send a PDF of a kid's book to a person in a bookshop. Within 30
Yeah.
seconds, they can tell if they like it or not.
Sure.
But if
Yeah.
it's an adult's novel, like, they're not going to read it.
Yeah.
There's just too much coming at them.
Sure.
So yeah, no, it's not easy. It's not easy. And if you put it on Amazon, and hope for the best, it could be a great book, but who's going to find it?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
often on Amazon, the trick is to have a series, and you advertise. You got to figure out Amazon ads, and you
Yep.
you advertise the first one in the series, and it might cost you $2 per buyer, and you
Yep.
might make $2.40.
Yep.
But if that person goes on to
Read the next one.
read book 2, 3, and 4, and 5,
Yeah.
then then it's profitable. It
Right.
might cost you $3 to get that buyer, and you
Yeah.
only make $2.40 out of it. But down the track, you can.
So you're not look. See, look at you. You are a marketer.
Oh yeah. Oh, you have to be. Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
be. Yeah. I did do a
Um.
marketing degree at university, but I can't say that but I can't say that I've really used it. I don't think I have, but maybe somewhere
Sure.
deep in my mind. But I don't know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
That's
I'm not
right.
sure I've been considering that. Maybe I should. Yeah.
um. It's probably a good place to put a pin in it. You got a new book coming out. Why don't you just give us a bit of a plug for the new book and the tour and stuff?
Yeah, sure. So it's called Marlin Foundling and the Circus of Lost Children. It's for
Yep.
probably 8 to 13-year-olds, 8 to 14 maybe.
Yep.
And it is about a circus in Paris in 1870 that's run entirely by children. And most of them are
Cool.
street urchins or
Yep.
orphans because, your parents won't let you join the circus. And it's always been that way. It's an ancient circus, and but it's got a hex on it so that if you try and stay past the age of 18, something bad will
Yeah.
happen. Your tightrope will break or you have
Right.
to leave. So always got to be kids.
Yeah.
And there's an evil rival circus master who tried to stay on at the circus too long with his twin brother, and their tightrope broke, and his twin brother died. So now he's hell bent on destroying the circus of
Revenge.
lost children. So that launches on June 15th.
And how will people find it?
Oh, it's in all the bookstores, or you can go to
Yep.
my website, dragonbrothersbooks.com.
Cool. I really appreciate your time. That was a really interesting chat. You are absolutely a generalist. You're doing everything. So thanks for your time, James. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.